thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Ian Scott, and I am the managing partner of Scott Legal. And today we're going to talk about EB-5 investments and really how those EB-5, the EB-5 investment program can be used to obtain a green card in the United States. And we're also going to talk about some of the considerations when you are getting a green card in the United States. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar will be recorded, so we will record it and post it on YouTube as a video. We will also send you a number of things after the webinar. We'll send you the recording, and we'll also send you the EB-5. We have an EB-5 guide that goes over the EB-5 comprehensive requirements. We will also send you a link where you can set up a consultation. And also the other thing to keep in mind is that we do have regular webinars, at least a couple of webinars a week is what we do. This one is going to focus on EB-5, but we have a number of different webinars on a number of different immigration topics. So feel free to sign up for those additional webinars, and we will send you information on how to sign up after the webinar. And the final thing is, if you do have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to add them to the chat box or the Q&A box, and we will get to all questions at the end of the presentation, or depending on the timeliness of the question, we may address the question during the presentation. So let's jump right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, the EB-5 program really can be broken down into two areas. The first area is regional center. So they both get you a green card. However, they are different. The second area is a direct investment EB-5. And let's just look at the differences between those two. So the first, regional center, when we think of the regional center program, we're really thinking of someone who is interested in a fairly passive investment. So this might be a situation where a hotel is building a large property and they want to attract 50 or 60 investors, and they want to raise capital through that investment, and they are going to do everything. The project is going to do everything. They're going to create the jobs, they're going to build the hotel, and really the only thing that the individual EB-5 investor is doing is giving them the money. The one thing with this is that because they are doing everything, there are high administration fees, and generally, the people who do this are only doing it for the green card because the returns are quite low. And in fact, when you factor in the administration fees, there is actually a negative return. So the only reason they're doing this is for the green card. Now, this when you go through this particular mechanism, it is an investment just like any other investment that other people are managing, just like investing in the stock market. So there is a risk. Like, so for example, if the project went belly up, if it went bankrupt, or even if a tornado came and hit and destroyed the property, and the project couldn't continue, then the person wouldn't get the green card. And there is no guarantee, there cannot be under this program any guarantee of the return of your funds. We're going to talk about indirect jobs in a little bit. But again, this is really a category. The regional center category is a category where people are doing it just to get the green card. To contrast this, there's the direct investment regional center program, and it has many of the same characteristics in terms of the EB-5 requirements. However, this might be somebody who, let's say, for example, is in the United States on an E2 visa, and they've started their own business, and they want to invest additional funds so that they are able to get a green card. And so this is someone who really wants control over their own destiny, and they want the potential for a higher return. Really, this is someone who definitely wants control, right? So this is not going to be a passive investor. This is going to be someone who wants to be able to control what is going on. Now, that means though that under this particular program, the individual who's investing under the EB-5 program is going to be responsible for job creation. And we're going to talk about the specifics of those requirements, but they are going to be responsible for job creation, unlike regional centers where it's a fairly passive investment. So let's jump into the actual EB-5 requirements. And when we look at the EB-5 requirements, they're really broken down into, I'd say, two main areas. And we'll talk about the aspects of those two main areas as we go through. So the first is investment. So you are required to invest either $800,000 or $1,050,000 in a business. So the business is what's called a new commercial enterprise, but that doesn't mean it has to be brand new. This is an entity that has been started after 1990. And if you invest in that business, so if the business is existing, if it already exists and you invest into the business, or if you start a new business and then invest into that business, then you could qualify under the program. Now, the difference between the 800,000 and the 1,050,000, the 250,000 difference, really depends on where the business is located. So if the business is located in a targeted employment area, which means that the business is located either in a rural area or an area where there's a high unemployment rate, so unemployment rate of 1.5 times the national average, then you can invest the lower amount. And if that's not the case, then you're always going to be required to invest the higher amount. So the the investment is going to be, let's take the example of someone who's starting their own business. They might put $800,000 or $1,050,000 in a bank account and then start spending the money and developing commitments. So they might have a lease, so they spend some money on the lease, but they also have a commitment over a 10-year or some period. They may have an employee, so that's going to be a commitment as well. They may commit to do some renovations or upgrades on the leased premises. They could buy computer equipment, advertising expenditures, anything really required to run the business. The only thing that we can't include in here are administrative fees. So if we are doing a regional center, for example, the fees that you pay to the regional center, like the $35,000 or $40,000 that you pay them in administration fees, that can't be included. And also the fees associated with, like, accounting fees and things like that, lawyer fees, those can't be included. So the 800,000 has to be spent on what they call job creating activities, whether it's in the regional center context or the direct investment context. The investment can be made over time but it can be made over time. However, you do have to have made the investment before you actually apply for the EB-5 program. So that's the 800,000, the full amount of the 800,000 or 1,050,000 would have to have been spent. And the investment, so this kind of applies to the situations where you might have someone on an E2, for example, and let's say someone has an existing business already, and then they invested only $100,000, but then let's say the business generated a profit of $2 million, and then they kept that money in the business, and the next year they reinvested it, and then turned around and said, I want to apply for EB-5. That doesn't work. The investment does have to come from outside of the company, and it has to come from an individual. So that is something to keep in mind. And there are, we're not going to go into them in a lot of detail, but there are a lot of differences between E2 and EB-5. E2 is only related to nationals from certain countries, but another big difference is that both requirements have both visas have a requirement that you have to prove where the money came from. However, the EB-5 requirement is quite extensive. It really is like a detailed audit of both where the money came from and a tracing of the funds right through to the bank account that made the investment. So it is quite an exercise. And often in the regional center context, that's all we're analyzing is the source of funds, because the project may already have prior approvals. So all we're really analyzing is the source of funds. So that's something to keep in mind. And the investment does have to be an equity investment. So you can't enter into a contract to kind of loan someone money, for example, and then apply for EB-5. There's no percentage requirement, unlike E2, where there's going to be 50% requirement. There's no percentage requirement so someone can even own a fraction of a percent of the company that they invest in. But it does have to be an equity investment. And I think another thing to kind of point out, another big difference between E2 and EB-5. For an E2, if you purchase a business, let's say someone has a business they sold for $300,000 and you purchased it under E2 context, that's completely fine for an E2, and you can apply for an E2 and it would be a successful application as long as the business had employees. But under the EB-5 context, that doesn't work. Well, it's the same example where someone buys a business from someone else and they spend $800,000 on the business, and let's say the business happens to be in a targeted employment area. That does not work for EB-5, because EB-5 says that the money didn't do anything for job creation. All that happened with the money is the money went to the seller, and so it wouldn't qualify. In that instance, the money would actually have to be invested into the business and then spent in the business. So there can be a transaction where someone, for example, invests $800,000 into a business. It goes into the business bank account, it's spent, and then they apply for under the EB-5 program. So that could work, but the normal situation of kind of just buying a business wouldn't work. So the second big part of the EB-5 program The first part we talked about was investment. The second big part of the EB-5 program is job creation, and you are required to create 10 full-time jobs. And if it's under the direct program, the jobs have to be direct jobs, so people that your company employs. If you're under the regional center program, it can be people that the company or the new commercial enterprise employs, but also it can include indirect jobs. So let's say that a hotel is being built, and then right beside because the hotel is being built, there may be other establishments that are built right beside or close to the hotel. And then you can get an economist to draft a report that shows that the fact that the hotel is there is creating indirect jobs. So that can count towards the 10 jobs. And often in regional center contexts, that those indirect jobs count for a large percentage of the jobs that actually have been created. So that can be very helpful, and that's not available under the direct concept. And we talked about the linkage to job creation. The money that's invested has to be linked to job creation. So let's say you invest in a company that already had 5 employees, and then you put the money into the business in the business bank account and then spent it, you'd still have to create 10 new full-time jobs. Those 5 jobs that are already there aren't going to count because they don't have anything to do with the money that was invested while at the time when the jobs actually existed. And you do want to make sure that you are documenting, because the positions are full-time jobs, not part-time, full-time jobs, and the qualified workers, the positions can only be U.S. citizens and green card holders. So we do recommend to people that they sign up for E-Verify so that they are not in a position where they have employees that maybe have provided them with false documentation. The EB-5 filing, in terms of how we file for an EB-5, there's a number of different petitions that are filed. So the I-526 is the main petition that's filed, or I-526E, depending on whether it's a regional center. Then when that's filed, as long as the visa category is current, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, you can file concurrently an I-485 if you're in the United States. And if you're not in the United States, you're going to do what's called consular processing. So you're going to wait till the I-526 has been approved and then go to a consulate. And then after you have had the green card for 2 years, you can file the I-829, which is a removal of the conditions, which basically says that you have created the 10 full-time jobs. So those are the key petitions that are filed. And this process really can drag on for quite a while. There's a kind of some new guidance that's come out with respect to, if your project is in a rural area, you can expect a pretty quick turnaround on your I-526 petition, maybe 6 months or a year, but very quick turnaround. But if not, you could be waiting a good 5 years just for the I-526 to be approved. So the program was reauthorized recently, and it's reauthorized until 2027, so we don't have to worry about it shutting down. And they implemented some procedures which are very helpful, because last time when the program wasn't reauthorized, it caused a lot of chaos with respect to adjudications. But this basically, the new legislation is clear and says that as long as you file before September 30th, 2026, your petition can be adjudicated. And the $800,000 limit and the $1,050,000 limit, their increases from $500,000 and $1 million respectively. So the higher end went up slightly, and the lower end went up quite significantly, $300,000. The other big change is that for the targeted employment areas, and this is going to impact both regional centers and direct investment, but the government is the only one who can really define those. And then one very, very important change in the new rules, which in the new rules came out in March of 2022, is that they have 32% of the EB-5 green card set aside for 20 for rural areas, 10 for high unemployment, and 2 for infrastructure projects. So what that means, it's very beneficial for nationals from China or India, for example, where they have long waits otherwise, because those categories are current as long as they invest in those programs, like in one of those. And then, as I said, if you are in a rural area, then you could be in a situation where you have a very rapid approval within 6 months or so. And the other big change was the ability to file the I-485 petition concurrently. And this was a significant change and an extremely beneficial change, because especially given the long waits, if someone is in the United States with a pending I-526 petition and their category is current, they are able to file an I-485 petition. And with that, they're able to file for work authorization and travel authorization. And we talked about the source of funds. There's also some clarification of loans and gifts. So what the service was trying to do initially was kind of say gifts had to be from immediate family and things like that, but that didn't go forward. So the investments can come from a gift or can come from loan, but you do have to then show where that person, if it was a person or a company, obtained the money from. And then they put in some new procedures, which really, if the regional center fails and it's no fault of the investor, there is kind of an ability for the investor to deploy the funds to another investment. Some other, things to consider when we're looking at EB-5 is, especially when we're looking at at-risk investment and we're looking at the direct investment. You can't just take your money and put it in a business bank account and set up an entity, put in a business bank account, and then apply for EB-5. There would have to be substantial commitments and/or money that was spent before before the petition could be approved. Loans and gifts, we talked about those already. And we talked about also the consideration for purchasing a business. So you can purchase a business under EB-5. However, the money that you spend, if you give it to the seller, that's not going to count. So you would have to, kind of put another influx of cash, 800,000 or 1,050,000 into the business to be able to, before you applied for the program. There is no percentage that you have to own, and you can't in any of the documents talk about a return on your investment, or in any of the documents have something that says that you are permitted to redeem the investment whenever you want. That's absolute no. There's a case that deals with this, and it's a big problem if you have a redemption clause in a agreement. And then, a lot of our clients move from E2 to EB-5, and as I said, if you started a business and you're investing over time, that's no problem. You can continue to invest until you hit the 800,000. You just have to really track everything. It is really a tracking exercise, making sure that you can prove your source of funds, and also maintain documentation to show that you are able to that you spent money on the requisite or the required things. So let's run through a quick EB-5 example to kind of illustrate a few different points that come up with respect to EB-5. So in this example, we're talking about someone who set up an E2 in 2015, and she purchased a business at that time, and the business had 5 full-time employees, and she paid a substantial sum, $40,000 in legal fees. Then in 2019, she took another $500,000 that was gifted to her, and the person who gifted her the money was someone that obtained the money through inheritance. But instead of giving her the money directly, they actually put the money directly into Helen's business bank account. Like, instead of putting it in Helen's personal account first, they put it in Helen's business bank account. You can imagine the reason I'm stressing this is because that is a big problem. When the money was invested, the $500,000, Helen had 10 full-time employees. So she had 5 before, and then she had 5 more that she, was able to hire during that time after she bought the business. And before the additional investment was made. At the end of 2019, she paid herself a bonus of 100,000, right? So there's 500,000 invested in 2019, and she paid herself a bonus in 2019. But the company did make some money. And on January 1st, she applied for EB-5 and said that she's invested 1.8 million, the 300,000, 500,000 plus the million that she had in retained earnings. And so she's also said she's created 10 full-time jobs, and she doesn't really want to hire any more people, but she might hire 3 or 4 more. And her business is located in an area where the unemployment rate is 7%. So let's go through a few of the issues that come up here. So one is that, like I said, for E2, it's completely fine that she has a business that she purchased, and she has a business that she spent $300,000 to buy. Qualifies for E2, but the $300,000 doesn't count for the EB-5 investment. She can still use the same legal entity, but she would then have to invest another $800,000, and it would be $800,000 in this case because it looks like the unemployment rate is 7%, and anywhere in the U.S. that would qualify because the national employment rate the employment rate where her business is located is 7%, and the national employment rate is 3 point something. So this is definitely 1.5 times the national average. So she would be looking to invest 800,000, but that 800,000 she would have to invest a new 800,000. So in 2019, the 500,000 could count it's been given to her as a gift. The only problem is that you do have to show where the money came from, and the USCIS does not care that the person who gave her the gift, that it was an inheritance from someone 15 years ago, and that means that that person inherited from someone else who passed away. And getting the documents might be very difficult. If you can't get the documents, they're going to deny your petition, right? So, and the other big problem here is that the person who gave the gift put the money directly into the business bank account. It is imperative that the applicant applying for EB-5 have possession and control of the funds before they're invested. So that is something you have to make sure that happens. Now, the employees here, for the purposes of this example, she doesn't have any employees that are eligible for EB-5 because when she bought the business, those employees don't count, the 5. And then she had 5 more employees that when she got the 500,000 invested, because let's just assume that the 500,000 actually can be used as EB-5 investment. Let's say USCIS ignored the fact that it was directly deposited. Then the 5 other full-time employees that were hired can't count either because the $500,000 didn't attract them. The 5, as I said, the money invested has to be linked to job creation. So, and then the other big issue in this fact pattern is that in 2019, after she got the bonus, after she got the gift, she paid herself a bonus of 100,000. Now she'd earned $1 million, so maybe this is okay in the fact pattern. But let's say she didn't earn $1 million, so that means she invested 500,000 and then paid herself $1 million. So, 100,000. So you do have to be very careful when you are paying yourself a bonus that you're able to provide documentation that the money that you're paying does not relate to the actual investment, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, so those are really the issues associated with this fact pattern. We talked a little bit about the timing considerations. It takes 5 years or so for EB-5 petition to be approved, unless you're under, something under a rural area. And then also, if you're born in Japan or born in China or India, there are country-specific quotas. All countries have quotas, but those 2 countries have used up the quota, so there are long delays, unless you're subject to the carve-out that I talked about for the rural areas, the high unemployment, and the infrastructure projects. The dual intent considerations, like if you're in the US on a visa and you're on an L or an H or something like that, then sure, you're going to have, those are dual intent visas. So you're going to be able to renew them even though you have a pending, green card application. But if you're on some other visa like TN or E2, then you really have to make sure that you are planning properly so that you're able to maintain your status during the pendency of the green card application. And sometimes we do have people that undertake parallel green card strategies, and I think the thing here is that planning really is the key. So that's really what you want to make sure that you're doing, that you are that you're planning exactly what is you're planning exactly what is happening, so that you are always making sure that you're maintaining status, and that you're always making sure that you are able to stay in the United States if you do have some type of underlying status. And also there's going to be planning on the front end, because you may want to choose a project that is in a rural area, because you will be able to go through the green card process a lot faster than any other area. Well, that is really all that we have in terms of prepared remarks. I'm just looking to see if there are any questions here, and I don't see any in the chat, and I don't see any in the Q&A. I know it's a lot of material to go through. As I said, what we will do is we will send you a copy of the video. We will send you a copy of the PowerPoint as well. We'll send you the EB-5 guide, and then also details on how you can set up a consultation with us to kind of go through these areas in more detail. Thank you. And again, I just took another quick look and I don't see any questions, so we'll end it there. So thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.